What's the craziest thing you've heard someone say after they thought they've hung up the call? My now ex-boyfriend Loki confessed to cheating on me with my now ex-best friend, without realizing I was still on the phone. I live in a very conservative household, so I wasn't allowed to sleep at his place, and he wasn't allowed to sleep at mine. One weekend, we hung out all day. Later, I called him because I wanted to talk a little longer. At the end of our 1.5-hour call, we said goodnight. He wanted to hang up but didn't push the button properly, so he was still on the call. Then I heard my best friend's voice. "Finally, you two are done. I thought I'd have to wait here all night." My boyfriend replied, "Of course not. I'm all yours now." Then came the obvious kissing noises. I just sat there in shock and hung up. I ignored both of them for 3 days before confronting them. My boyfriend apologized nonstop, and my best friend just cried. I cut them both off and told our whole friend group. Now, 2 years later, none of my friends talk to them, and from what I hear, they aren't in contact either. Story 2. I had a boss take a phone call while he was going through a drive-thru. My female colleague and I were talking to him, and he told us he had to place an order, but apparently forgot we were still on the line. He said the female coworker I was with was only good for her giant rack, and she needed a good pounding to lose her attitude. There was someone else in the car with him apparently. She left the company, but I heard she got a handsome severance package. Story 3. This one was actually something I said. After thinking I'd hung up on my customer, I blurted out, "We'll be making babies tonight. You should really come." To my customer, it probably sounded like I was inviting them to some kind of Russian roulette to impregnate my wife party. Then I heard them say, sounds like fun, but no thanks." In reality, I was telling one of my college students who wanted to skip class to come to the biology lab, where we were learning about meiosis by combining little cardboard chromosomes into complete people with various alleles of interest. Definitely not how it sounded to my customer. LOL. Story 4. During my weekly call with my mother to exchange news and life updates, she was super positive and supportive as always. We exchanged goodbyes, and although she thought she had hung up, she hadn't. I overheard her tell her visiting friend, "Oh, Sailor Loon just called me. Ugh." She then immediately started talking about me, expressing disappointment in my choices. She said my new partner, whom I had just told her about, was probably an absolute loser, like my last partner. She went on to say none of it surprised her because I'd always been dramatic and unstable, just as she had always known. She dismissed my job, my lifestyle, and just ripped into me for several minutes before I couldn't handle it anymore and hung up. It was a huge blow. My mom had never indicated she felt that way, and she was usually very sweet and supportive. I never told her how much it hurt, but I significantly cut down on sharing and stopped confiding in her as much. Story 5. I was wrapping up my work in a small office where we communicated with our field employees by radio. Our assistant manager had just gotten a call from our new bank representative, apparently a very attractive woman. He set the phone down for a moment while he radioed our owner with the banker's question. The owner responded, "You talking to our new banker?" "Yes." "Tell her if she'll bend over, I'll drive her home." Ha ha. The assistant manager reached for the hold button, but it was way too late. Story 6. My crazy mother called me once while arguing with my stepfather. He was a truck driver, and she would often go with him on his routes, leaving us at home alone. But that's another story. At the time, I was 11. My mom called our landline while she was screaming at my stepdad. This happened frequently. He would accuse her of sleeping with other men. Other dumb shit that wasn't true since he was the one cheating on the road. And she would call me and my younger siblings to vouch for her as if we weren't just innocent kids. This time, she was screaming and crying like a mad woman, pleading with him not to leave her. It was a very traumatic time, but now looking back as an adult, I feel nothing. They were adults acting like imbeciles. They continued arguing on the phone while I said my part, told my mom to calm down, and reminded her they were coming home because we needed food. Often, we would be without water or electricity. It didn't matter to them. They could eat and shower at truck stops. So who cared about us kids, right? Our only meals were at school, and I was responsible for dressing and getting my siblings ready. No other adults ever suspected a thing, which, looking back, is really sad. I guess I wasn't much help on the other side because she seemingly hung up the phone, but I could still hear them arguing. Then I heard my stepdad say, "I can't stand those friggin' kids," to which my mom replied, "You don't like kids? You don't love my kids? I want to be with you. I'll off them if you want." That moment left me frozen, and after that day, 13 years ago, I never brought it up. In the months that followed, I definitely had trouble sleeping. always fearing that our own mother might actually kill us just to satisfy an abusive, disgusting excuse of a man. I have never told any of my siblings or anyone else about it until now. They are still together, still very abusive to each other. When I hear them yell now as an adult, it triggers my fight or flight response, and it takes me back to when I was 10. But now, I can snap myself out of it and remind myself that I'm an adult and their decisions can't hurt me anymore. But when I see them both, I think of that phone call. It still gives me goosebumps sometimes. I'll never understand how a woman, a mother, if I can even call her that, could be willing to threaten to harm her own children just to please a man who does nothing but treat her like crap. They are both abusive to each other, and I will never understand why they continue to live this way. They both need help. I have forgiven her, even though she has never apologized for a single thing. Whenever I bring up traumatic things that happened, she always claims I made it up, says it was just a child's imagination, and insists my childhood was good. It's exhausting, arguing, so I've just let it go. The only gain I have from the past is knowing that I will never ever want a man like that, or children who would have to live through something like that. She taught me what kind of woman I do not want to be, and for that, I am grateful. Story 7. This happened back in the early days of cell phones in 1999. My boyfriend of 5 years and I had broken up a few months before a party but decided to give it another try by attending together. He got very drunk, and after walking me home about half a mile, I told him he couldn't stay with me because of how inebriated he was. After he left, I called to make sure he got home okay. Cell phones were still new and unreliable. He answered, said he was fine, and I heard a car pull up. He said, "Hey," to someone, then "Bye" to me. The sound got muffled, as he must have put the huge Nextel in his pocket, but I clearly heard the car door open and him mutter, "Friggin' bish." A woman's voice asked, "What happened?" My ex slurring, "She said I couldn't stay because I'm too drunk." Woman, "Oh, that's not right. Where should I take you?" My ex, "I don't care. Anywhere." Then the line cut out. Needless to say, we did not get back together. Story 8. We tell this story to everyone who starts working on our floor, or at least we did before the COVID era. A sales guy called our accounts payable department. He, Brody, was all sweet and friendly to my accounting coworker, Tracy. He had messed up and was hoping to stop an invoice from being paid. The situation didn't make much sense, and he was going through the wrong channels to cancel an order with a vendor. Tracy told him who he needed to contact in procurement to return the material and get a credit issued. The invoice had already been paid, so even with authorization, it could not be stopped. For some reason, everyone answers the phone on speaker, so everyone in the surrounding offices overheard the call. Both parties were polite and professional, exchanged pleasant goodbyes, and then Brody fumbled his phone into its cradle and clearly said, "Damn, Tracy is such a two-faced bish." He proceeded to verbally trash her to his office mates, calling her hateful names and saying she needed to learn how to do her job. Tracy sat frozen in her chair, staring at the phone, mouth open, before suddenly bursting into tears and running to the bathroom. No one thought to end the call. We were all too shocked. After a brief "what do we do?" discussion, someone from inventory management dialed the extension of one of Brody's office mates, who answered on speaker. We heard the tirade stop, followed by a pause, and then Brody shouting, "Crap," before the call abruptly ended with a clatter. Brody came by later to apologize, and the whole floor verbally tore him a new one. IIT, HR, and management got involved. Years later, everyone, including Brody and Tracy, laughs about it. It's now the classic, the mic is always on story we tell every new employee. Story 9. Not crazy at all, but a coworker called to ask me about her schedule. I read off her appointments for the day. She said, "Great, thanks, bye." And as she put the phone down, I heard, "Frigging bish." I quit that job on the spot. It hurt my feelings because I thought we were friendly, if not friends. F you twice, Bethany. Story 10. I think I got warned. A few years back, I had been chatting with a guy online. We started flirting, and after about a month, we began talking on the phone. I was very nervous because of past experiences, so we were taking it slow. We started talking about getting lunch. He was an hour away. One evening, after a long talk, we said goodnight. He thought he'd hung up, but the next second I heard a woman giggle and say, "How'd it go?" He replied, "Great. Told ya." She asked, "Do you think she suspects anything?" And he said, "Nope, not a thing." Then I heard exaggerated kisses. Mua, mua, mua. And I went cold and prickly all over. I couldn't get my line to disconnect and finally had to turn the whole thing off and back on. I was really scared. I didn't think he had my address, but I wasn't sure. I slept with my gun on the nightstand for weeks. I never picked up another call. I sent him an email saying my ex had just come back from Afghanistan and we were going to try to make things work again. I apologized for wasting his time, but I believed my ex and I had a future together and wished him luck. I have no way of knowing what was actually going on or what I was supposed to be falling for. I am so grateful for that botched disconnect. Story 11. I work in a field where I sometimes have to investigate child abuse and apply to have children removed when necessary. I knew one child was being abused, but she often retracted what she said, which is common in these cases. While I was gathering evidence, I still had to maintain contact with her parents. One day, I received a voicemail from the mother after she returned my call. She was sickly sweet while speaking to me. She clearly thought she had hung up because immediately afterward her voice changed. In a harsh, snarling tone, she said to the child, "That frigging bish is on my back. Because of your big frigging mouth. Talk to her one more time and I'll kick your teeth in." The message continued until my voicemail cut it off. So she never realized she hadn't hung up. That recording became one of the many pieces of evidence I submitted to the court, and thankfully, the child was removed. Story 12. I was at a bar with some friends when one of the guys started bishing about his long-term girlfriend. To us, fine, that's what friends are for. To the bartender, whatever. He gets paid to listen to people bish and couldn't care less. But then he started venting to a girl he was attempting to hit on, which we hadn't seen from him before. Then his girlfriend called him to ask something real quick. He answered, then put the phone down and turned to the girl saying, "See, that's what I'm talking about. Not only can she not smoosh, but she can't figure basic things out for herself. That's why I want out. I want a girl who can think for herself, and a girl that can smoosh right." Wink. Side note, the thinking for herself thing was something he had overheard the girl say about her career path in an earlier conversation with a friend. I looked down and saw the phone screen still on, the timer still counting up. I nudged my friend and nodded toward the phone. He picked it up, confused, thinking someone had called him, and said, "Hello?" but only heard a click. Later that night, he got home and rightfully found all his stuff in the yard. 4-year relationship ended over it. He called me at 3 a.m., asking if he could crash at my place. Of course I let him. I wasn't going to leave a friend literally out in the cold. He stayed for a week while I helped negotiate the breakup to keep it as amicable as possible. As someone trusted by both parties, I helped make sure he could collect his things without her having to be there, doing my best to act as a neutral third-party arbitrator. After a week, he moved in with some other people. I told him that while I was glad I could be there for him in his time of need, the need was self-produced, and I could no longer be friends with someone willing to treat other people the way he did that night at the bar. He was shocked, but it was something the rest of our friend group discussed, and none of us were comfortable with his behavior. Story 13. I used to remotely train insurance agents to use rating software to write policies. One day, I called an agent at the scheduled time and he gave me remote access to his computer so I could walk him through the software. Then he said, "Oops, hold on one sec, I have to take this call, I'm so sorry," and clicked "I'm on hold." But he forgot I was still viewing his screen, or maybe he didn't fully understand what remote access meant. After all, this was back in 2007 or so. I watched as he clicked his Internet Explorer favorites, opened a corn site, entered his user ID and password, like it was the Stone Age, and started watching a very naughty video. I hung up, called the office back, got transferred, and he started apologizing for taking so long. Then I told him, "I am still viewing your screen." The utter panic in his voice as he tried to make excuses. I clicked a link in an email by mistake. I don't know how this happened, was hilarious. This story became a hot topic in our department for months. I often wonder how many times that guy locked his office door with a "Do Not Disturb" sign. Probably best. I don't know. Story 14. I once called the company that approves medication and medical devices for Kaiser. I spoke to a representative about getting approved for a device that could help with my diabetes. Of course, they said no, but I guess he hit mute instead of hanging up because I could hear him talking and laughing with his coworkers. He was mocking me, repeating things I had said, "But I need this device to help me. I can afford this, and it's covered in my plan," in a sarcastic voice. Then he went on to say, maybe he needs to lose some weight and stop being fat and he wouldn't need this device. At the time, I was 215 pounds and 5 feet 10 inches tall. I called again and spoke to a manager. Yes, I Karen'd, and they apologized and said they would speak to the individual. I asked if I could get an apology from the customer service representative and they said, "We can't. You'll just have to take our word for it." Story 15. Not me. but my father. Here's a little backstory. My grandpa was a wealthy narcissist who, in his later years, started seeing a woman who was clearly in it for the money. She got in his head and slowly tried to isolate him from the family so she could keep his wealth after he passed. During a phone call between my dad and his father, my grandpa forgot to hang up and overheard the woman say something like, "Your son is a useless piece of crap that's not good for anything." Shockingly, he began to agree. This was promptly interrupted by her screaming, "Honey, you didn't hang up the phone." She is easily the worst person I have ever met, and I have a lot of messed up stories about things she's done. Rotten. Story 16. I was the guy who thought the phone call had ended, and this is a memory that continues to haunt me. The year was 2014 or 2015. My partner and I weren't married yet, but we had lived together for about 5 years in a decent neighborhood in Los Angeles. We were looking at houses semi-casually when one near USC came on the market. It was a small Craftsman, 2 bedrooms, but in a nice neighborhood and an absolute fantastic value. It was just barely in our budget, but technically we could have afforded it. I biked past it every day on my way to work, and it felt like the perfect starter home. We toured it and liked it, though the real estate agent was a little pushy. The house was in good condition, not perfect, but not a fixer-upper either. It was move-in ready, with a small fenced backyard that had a ton of potential. I was in love. I was fully committed to buying. My partner, however, wanted to wait and was extremely put off by the agent. Offers were already on the table, though, so if we wanted the house, we'd have to move fast. At the very end of the showing, while we were still waffling back and forth about the house, my partner's mother called. He told her all about the house and some of his doubts. She basically gave her opinion that we shouldn't buy, or that we shouldn't rush the decision. After the call, I went ballistic. I had felt like we were so close to making it work that he could be convinced. But once the call ended, I knew it was over. He had made up his mind. My partner's mother and I already had a very rocky relationship with a lot of unresolved issues. I told him I hated his mother. I found her nosy, controlling, and obnoxious, and I was sick of his codependence with her. I don't remember the specifics, but it was a vicious rant about how much I disliked his mother, how much of a mama's boy he was, and how he needed to cut the damn umbilical cord. I screamed about what an absolute bitch she was, how much I hated her, and how she was ruining our future together. Welp, my partner hadn't actually hung up, and his mother had been listening to us fight, or rather, to me yell, the entire time. For about 10 to 15 minutes. She called the next day to inform him that she'd heard everything. I was mortified. Not so much at what I had said, I still stand by much of it, but at the fact that I had yelled and communicated it in such a toxic way. Aftermath. I now have deep, persistent anxiety about people listening in on the phone. My partner and I are currently married, and I have a strained but cordial relationship with my mother-in-law. I have always deeply regretted not buying that house. Checked on Zillow just now. The house has tripled in value since we looked at it. Story 17. Stupid wuss fell for it. This was from a student's parent while I was excusing their kid from an assignment he missed because his grandmother had supposedly just died. She hadn't. Even so, the kid was never going to pass the class under any circumstances because he was a complete knob. Once I spoke to his parents, I understood why. He still failed the class even without that assignment. So, I know one of us was the stupid jerk. I'm just not sure it's the same person they think it is. Story 18. This was a few years ago. Freelance work wasn't going well, so I was applying for any job I could find. This was in Italy, by the way. I had a job interview scheduled on Skype. The job offer was pretty vague, but I had nothing better to do, so I gave it a shot. 5 minutes into the call, I realized it was an obvious pyramid scheme. I let the guy finish his pitch, then said, "No thanks," and hung up. He must have thought the call had ended, or maybe Skype glitched because I could still see him, looking disappointed, and I could still hear sounds on his side. Then, the unpleasant voice of an old lady came from off-screen. She had clearly been there the whole time. Their dialogue went something like this. "He didn't fall for it? Nah." Then the call finally ended for real. LOL. Story 19. I was going through the workplace ombudsman because I had been bullied badly at work by my manager. I felt like I was going crazy and that no one would believe me, so I got a solicitor to speak on my behalf, as I had basically had a mental breakdown at this point. We were on a call with the manager, her boss, and the mediator to try to reach an agreement. The manager and her boss were denying that anything had happened. The mediator asked the other party to hang up, saying she would come back to them soon. They did not hang up properly. The manager then proceeded to say something along the lines of, "Well, she's a right old bish, isn't she?" The mediator yelled, "I suggest you hang up right now," and the line went dead. Oh, the shock, the relief. Finally, an inkling of her true self had come out. I had never felt so validated. The mediator couldn't actually take sides, but she was not impressed. In the end, I won my case and was compensated. Story 20. My aunt overheard her mother-in-law talking badly about her, claiming she was a terrible mother. My aunt and her husband both work full-time and always have. They will not send their youngest daughter to daycare before she can speak, for obvious reasons. So, my aunt and uncle worked opposite shifts to make sure their daughter always had someone to watch her. My uncle's mother was a stay-at-home mom, but in this economy, you can't rely on just one parent working and provide well for your children. This is something she simply didn't understand. One day, my aunt asked her mother-in-law to watch her grandchild for 3 hours while she went to the doctor. She gladly agreed, and they said their goodbyes. Later, my aunt overheard her mother-in-law talking to her husband about how my aunt is a terrible mother, always working and supposedly unable to care for her children. My cousins are very well taken care of course. Let's just say she is no longer part of their lives. Story 21. I have multiple student loans from college. I had them set up so that my payments were divided between the loans, and I was a payment ahead, just to have nothing to worry about. For some reason, they adjusted it so that all of my payment was going to one loan, leaving me with a balance due alert. I tried calling to fix it and was redirected to a representative with a very thick accent. He seemed nice enough. I explained the problem. We talked through it, and he said he needed to speak to his supervisor to get it fixed. I didn't respond to something he muttered. I wasn't sure if it was for me or for someone else, but figured if it was for me, he'd repeat it. Nope. I guess he assumed I had hung up because he suddenly shouted, "Don't talk to me then, mother effer." I calmly responded, "Hello," even though I knew exactly what he had said. He immediately backpedaled and went right back to being customer service friendly. Story 22. I work with a guy who used to work in IT help desk. He had a habit of muting himself and aggressively cussing out whoever he was on the phone with, then unmuting and acting like nothing happened. I knew that eventually he would miss that mute button. One day, I was on a conference call with him, another company, and a director-level individual from our company for some troubleshooting. After a while, we decided to call it a day and reconvene in the morning. At that moment, we heard, "Screw this crap," followed by silence, and then, "Excuse me," from the director. After a brief pause, he dropped off the call, and we apologized. The next morning, he came in with an elaborate story about spilling hot coffee on his leg and having to drop his pants outside his car. He showed everyone in the office a massive burn mark on his leg. The curious part was that he had been on the call with us for about 4 hours and had been away from home in his car the whole time, with no access to fresh coffee. If he had any coffee, it was likely cold by then. My guess is he realized he had messed up and staged an injury to avoid repercussions, but we'll never know. Story 23. I was once called an a-hole by a manager at a former job. I was scheduled off that day and had made plans, but she added a shift without telling me. I didn't show up for it. When she called to ask where I was, I told her I was off. She argued that I had a shift on the schedule. I explained I already had plans for my day off, so I wouldn't be coming in. Her response, "Fine, bye." Frigging a-hole, as she started hanging up. She was a huge bitch who constantly tried to treat me like her personal servant. I eventually transferred to a different location to get away from her and my ex, who also worked there. Officially, I said I transferred because I moved, but really, I liked the new location and my regulars. I just couldn't stand working with them any longer. Story 24. This happened to someone I worked with just as the first lockdown started and work from home was implemented. Our phones were set to auto answer if you were on ready and a call came through for your department. A beep would alert you, and you were supposed to greet the caller. This system was implemented because people would often let calls ring, hoping someone else would answer, or claim they didn't hear the phone. Anyway, this guy had finished a call and was back on ready when his girlfriend came into the room. They decided to have some fun, completely ignoring the headset, while the phone auto-answered a customer call. The customer was greeted, not with a easy hello, but by the very distinct sounds of a rather vigorous romp happening in the background. Unsurprisingly, this led to a complaint and a company-wide email reminding everyone that such behavior was not acceptable during work. It also instructed employees to set their phones to away if they couldn't take calls. Story 25. I was the third party in this. A coworker failed to hang up properly after a conversation with the boss and immediately launched into a very creative, expletive-laden rant about the boss and what he should do with himself. As this was happening, I received a text from the boss suggesting that I inform the coworker she had not hung up. I got the coworker's attention and told her she hadn't hung up. Still in full expletive mode, she asked what made me think that. My response was, I got a text from the boss. It was the first time I ever saw the color literally drain from someone's face. Story 26. It was a business conference call. The other side had asked some pretty stupid questions, but was still poised to do over $1 million worth of business with us. Thinking the call had ended, one guy in the room started calling them frigging idiots and saying that what they were trying to do was never going to work. They did not say anything else, but we all heard the sound of the other side disconnecting. Later, they reached out and said they were going to go in another direction. Story 27. I worked in sales, inbound calls, and had a pleasant conversation with a customer who politely declined the offer and said she was going to look elsewhere. We said our goodbyes. Nothing out of the ordinary. She was a really sweet lady and had called in with her husband. As soon as she thought she had hung up, she slammed her phone down and started yelling at her husband. Screw them. Are you frigging kidding me right now? $350 a frigging year? I'm not paying that much for this damn piece of she product. How the heck could that bitch pitch that with a straight frigging face? I gave her the decency of hanging up myself after that, but she was 100% right to be pissed, honestly. Edit. Inbound means she called us to update something, not the other way around. I said she was justified because the company sucked. It was exactly what she called in for, just with a price increase she wasn't expecting. Story 28. I have a not muted story. WebEx, 500 people on the call, right when everyone was getting used to working remotely. Whoever set it up did not mute the audience by default. The chaos was amazing. Dozens of people were unmuted and going about their lives. Dogs barking, kids crying, kitchen utensils clanging, while the call leaders pleaded for people to mute themselves. My favorite part was when they had things mostly quiet. About 5 people were still unmuted, including one guy who thought he was muted and yelled, "Jesus Christ, people, mute your frigging phones." Before realizing he was not on mute, they threw in the towel and ended the 1.5-hour meeting after 15 minutes. Story 29. I had a job where I was in a position to write off a substantial phone bill. The customer said it was because her mother was dying overseas, had dementia, and needed to hear things in her daughter's voice to believe anything, including doctor's instructions. She was heartbroken and sobbing about how if she had the kind of money to pay the phone bill, she would have just gone back to her country because the flight would have cost less. She was right about that. I wrote off the entire phone bill. She cried like a jilted lover in a rom-com and said people like me were angels from God and so on. After I wished her a good evening and she thought the call had ended, she said to someone in a perfectly normal voice, "Well, that worked." Story 30. I worked at a call center years ago and a customer was kind of panting while trying to sound normal at the same time. As soon as the conversation ended, they thought they had hung up and immediately went into full-on moaning and dirty talk with their partner, clearly continuing whatever they had been doing before answering the phone. What boggled my mind was that he answered the phone in the first place. Edit. Since this blew up, I'll share another story. This time, someone from a call center called me. From her voice, you could tell she was a hefty woman, with that constant heavy breathing tone when she talked. The call ended, but I did not press end because I assumed they would. They didn't. She then started talking to a coworker about fried liver and onions. The way she gushed over it made it sound weird and incredibly gross. She said she ate it at least once a day as her meal, making slurping noises and moaning sounds while describing it. I have never felt so disgusted listening to someone talk about food. Story 31. Mine was a butt dial, not a failure to hang up. My parents are divorced and remarried. When I was 17, I lived with my mom and saw my dad on the weekends. I knew my dad and stepmom were possibly trying to have kids, but they had not really said much to me about it. One day, I got an accidental call from my dad while they were breaking the pregnancy news to my stepmom's parents. I answered and heard my step-grandmother saying congratulations and how happy she was for them both. I listened for a couple of minutes and was able to piece together what the congratulations were about. My dad and stepmom told me about the pregnancy the next time I saw them, and I acted surprised. I did not want to ruin it for them. I did not tell them until years later that I had found out about my future brother from inside my dad's pocket. Story 32. Last year, my job involved monitoring call quality, so I would often listen to phone agents in real time. In one instance, there was a caller who simply could not understand what was being explained. After the agent got off the phone with him, there was a 3-second window where I could still hear the agent scream, "Jesus, screw him." I did not mark them down for it, since the call had technically ended at that point. Another time, an agent placed a caller on hold, but because of how the phone system worked, I could still hear the agent even though the caller was hearing music. She put the caller on hold so she could call her sister and plan a vacation. Story 33. My mother-in-law had a new boss who hated her. She was about 3 years from retirement and felt like he was trying to push her out early so she would lose part of her pension. After her mother died, she asked me to check her answering machine while she was gone and let her know if anything important came in and to water her plants. Around the third day I was there, there was a message from her boss offering his condolences. Then you could hear the click where he thought he had hung up but must have placed the receiver wrong and was still on the line. He ruthlessly made fun of her with his wife for the next 5 minutes before saying, "Oh crap," and hanging up. She was at a very low point in her life, and I did not have the heart to tell her or leave the message on the machine. It would have absolutely crushed her. I did record it, then deleted it from her machine. I called that a-hole and told him what I had, why I was not telling her right then, but absolutely would if needed in the future, and that I had better hear nothing but how wonderful work was going for her and how well she was treated until she retired. I told him I could not even understand what kind of piece of shit you had to be to talk about someone like that behind their back, especially at such a time in their life. And that is exactly what happened. She had a wonderful last few years and believed that her mother's death had softened him and caused him to treat her kindly and with respect. That was 20 years ago. I never told her and never will. I would not want to take those last few good years away from her. Story 34. My best friend at the time had been running a year-long prank on me in middle school, back when I was too naive to know any better. She claimed to have a brother who had seen me on campus and had a crush on me. She did a very convincing voice impression of a guy and would hand off the phone to her brother whenever I called. She was living with her grandparents, while her other siblings, 2 sisters who were real, and the brother who was not, lived with her mom, so when I went over to visit, I never saw him and never suspected a thing. One day, I was talking to this fake brother, and the conversation was starting to get a little intimate. I was a romantic, what can I say? He abruptly tried to end the call, and thought he had. When I heard my best friend say, "That was close, she almost got me," I proceeded to call her out and didn't speak to her for months. Later on, due to other events I won't get into, I suspected she was a lesbian who actually had a crush on me and was in denial. I don't know where she is now. It's been years since I last heard from her. Story 35. In the early days of Facebook, my former father-in-law was just discovering it and reconnecting with old friends. He was having fun seeing who had gained weight, who had divorced, who was a millionaire now, and so on. One guy he connected with gave him his phone number, so my FIL called him. He didn't answer, so he left a message like, "Hey Bill, it's been a while. Just wanted to catch up. Give me a call back at phone number." And then jokingly added, "And I heard you got fat." To his horror, the call was still active and recording, so it probably came out like, "And I heard you got fat. Oh crap. Oh my god, it didn't hang up, crap. It's still wrecker." Click. To my knowledge, that guy never returned the call. Story 36. I found out I was single this way back when I was in the army. I got the chance to call my girlfriend and took it. It was a nice call. She told me what she had been up to, and we made plans for some leave I would be getting soon. We said goodbye, and she hung up. I still had a few minutes left, so I just sat there holding the phone so the next guy would not hassle me for it, when I heard from the line, male voice. "So, when's he coming back?" Ex-girlfriend, "Not for a couple of weeks. We have plenty of time." Male voice, "You're going to break up with him before that, right?" Ex-girlfriend, "Of course." I hung up and felt like shit. I ghosted her when I went on leave and later found out she had been seeing the other guy for a while. I did not see her for years, until one day I was taking my kid to get pizza at a place in a strip mall. There she was, standing next to an SUV, staring at me like she had seen a ghost. I waved, went inside, and that was it. Story 37. I have a friend who's awesome to hang out with, but can be super flaky. Her brother was dating another friend of ours, but they lived in Thailand together. The mutual friend was home for a bit and was heading back the next morning, so we met up with a few other friends. The flaky friend said she would be there, but flaked. When I called to see if we could get a hold of her, it went to voicemail and I thought I had hung up. Instead, she got a voicemail of an exasperated me saying, "She always frigging does this. I don't think she shows up more than a third of the times we make plans." She confided in me a year later that she had gotten it, but thanked me because she hadn't realized how bad she'd been about keeping plans. The voicemail made her reflect, and she started making a point of keeping plans after that, saying it even helped improve her depression. I was so embarrassed, but I'm glad there was a happy ending. Story 38. A colleague of mine dialed into a meeting with 2 to 3 managers and about 25 sales reps, only for everyone to suddenly go quiet. One person told him the meeting was canceled and he could drop off, since the reps were just chatting about sales stuff. He pretended to hang up but stayed on the line. They were basically planning a mutiny because they didn't like that their regional manager was a woman. They had a whole strategy to cause a massive screw-up that would cost the company a lot of money and make it look like it was her fault, so she would get fired. The dumb bastards even did a little "are we all in agreement" roll call at the end. We worked in a call center, so his end of the call was recorded. Within a week, every last one of them was fired, and within a month, they were replaced. Story 39, I was doing some work and had submitted a quote using my work account for some parts. I also used their services for personal projects at home with a different account, but somehow they connected the two and called my personal cell phone to ask questions about my professional order. Obviously, I didn't answer, and it went to voicemail. The woman left a polite message about the issue, and then there was a click. A couple of seconds of silence, followed by, "Answer your frigging phone!" Another few seconds passed before the line disconnected. I called them back and asked why they were contacting my personal account for an order submitted with different contact info. I also let them know that maybe they should make sure they've hung up before cursing at me. Story 40. I once got a voicemail from a client at work. After he hung up, the voicemail went on for about 5 more minutes with him faintly talking in the background. As far as I could tell, he had made a call on his office landline, didn't hang up fully, and then called his lawyer on his cell phone. The extra 5 minutes of the voicemail was a faint but utterly bat crap detailed discussion of a domestic abuse lawsuit where he was accused of kicking down a door and having a screaming argument while throwing things at his wife. Story 41. Not me, but a story my parents told me. Here's some quick background to make it make sense. My parents had 3 kids. Me, my twin brother, and our younger brother. My twin has severe autism, and I don't. We're fraternal. Between his autism and just being kids, the 3 of us were pretty difficult to deal with. And messy too. Anyway, back to the story. We had a babysitter who, I guess, thought she was calling her friend because my mom received a voicemail that went something like this. These kids are absolutely horrible. They are disgusting and awful and don't listen. The whole family is disgusting and I hate being here. I also hate this family. These kids are spoiled and disgusting and terrible. This is the worst family. My mom heard the message as it was happening and picked up. When the babysitter realized what had happened, she quickly hung up. I mean, what she was saying about us being horrible and disgusting was probably true. But still, we were kids, and my twin has severe autism. Story 42. I was on the phone with my sister. She hung up but somehow failed to disconnect, so I could hear her talking to our mother. It was a half-hour conversation, bad-mouthing and making fun of me and my wife. I knew they didn't like my wife, but I never expected them to say such vile things behind my back. I also thought my sister and I had a good relationship, but apparently not. I hung up, called them back, and yelled at both of them. Then I went no contact for a year. We eventually reconciled, but we barely talk now. Story 43. I'm from the Deep South and have an obvious accent. I called one of our New York City suppliers, and while I was supposedly on hold, I heard one of their salespeople mocking my accent with various slurs and laughing uproariously. As soon as she came back on the line, I purred in my most southern drawl, "Y'all are fired," and hung up. My boss agreed, and that company lost a valuable contract. Don't bite or mock the hand that feeds you. Story 44. Friggin' prick. I hope he fails. It was a Zoom with about 12 people on it. The topic was securing funding for expansions for our partnered media company labels and businesses. I was feeling great since I had secured a decently large amount of funding for our company, remodeling facilities, hiring more technicians, and bringing on some on-site IT workers. I was the last of the group to hang up since I was busy confirming some other info via email. Turns out one of our partners who wanted the same funding but didn't have the revenue and had been complaining about their debt the entire time thought they deserved it. So they let that zinger fly. Then I also heard, "Dude, you're still on the call," followed by the little disconnect boop sound. We didn't fail. Actually, it ended up being our best year ever. Honestly, I don't know if I should have brought it up with anyone, but I haven't talked to them since. Story 45. I work IT support for multiple companies as part of a managed service provider, MSP. I got a call from a user who couldn't print from the main printer. I asked permission to access her system and she gave the okay. I connected and started troubleshooting the printer. Her coworker came in, clicking all over and messing things up, so I used my remote connection software to lock the keyboard and mouse and continued troubleshooting. He didn't know I was on the phone because he wasn't listening to her or me talk. I muted my phone and let him go, letting out a string of obscenities, calling me a POS, a MFer, and ranting about how he was going to get me fired. Then I unmuted and asked him if he wanted me to transfer him to my boss, who just happened to be sitting next to me listening. She leaned over and said, "Hey Bob, knock it off." He got quiet, real fast. She then called his boss and filled him in on what happened. He was never allowed to talk to techs again. I was always super nice and polite when I went on site to work, and I could see him dying inside every time. It was great. Story 46. I called the housing company that manages my apartment about a plumbing issue. I explained that I hadn't heard from them for days after filing the original ticket and that it had been an ongoing problem. The guy on the phone assured me it would get taken care of. He said something like, "We do our best to handle requests as quickly as possible. We are always on the side of the tenants. Don't worry, we got you." I thanked him, said goodbye, and he hung up, or so he thought. I was driving and had the call patched through my car's Bluetooth. As I reached to hang up, I heard him yell, frigging tenants! Frigging mother frigging tenants! Screw all this!" I heard a couple of people laughing in the background and someone saying something I couldn't make out. Then the guy said, "The landlord is not going to like this plumbing situation. It's going to cost too much. And this dude keeps filing tickets for the same problem. Landlord is going to freak out. Frigging hell." I didn't know what to say, so I hung up. Then I immediately called back, and the guy answered very cheerfully. I said, "Hey, so if the landlord is not going to like the situation with the plumbing, I can always take this to the rent board, file paperwork, and force this issue into a legal matter." The guy went quiet. I continued, "I heard what you said. Sucks that you're the middle person, but this is your job. And if you can't be on my side because the landlord wants to keep costs down, I can always go a different route. This plumbing issue is breaking a couple of rental ordinances, and I have a history of filing tickets for the same issue only for it to get patched up and not fixed. You let me know what you think I should do." He was sheepish in his reply. "Sorry, man. It's just, your landlord has made it very clear he doesn't want to spend money fixing things in your apartment. Low-key, he wants you to move out so he can upgrade it and rent it for more. And it's stressful because I know you're right, but if the landlord doesn't sign off on the expense, I gotta give you the runaround, and that sucks. But let me see what I can do." A couple of weeks later, the issue was fixed. Story 47. I worked at a job where we frequently had conference calls on speakerphone. Usually 5 people in the room with multiple people from vendors. After every meeting, the boss would say, "Goodbye," wiggle the phone to make a little shuffling noise, and then press mute. Usually, nothing happened, and the vendors would hang up too. But one time, I heard a vendor say, "Man, those guys are so clueless. I'm gonna charge them an extra 10%. We did not choose that vendor. Story 48. I was managing a restaurant, which sometimes really means babysitting a bunch of adults who haven't grown up yet. A habitual problem server called in, claiming he was sick and couldn't make his shift. I knew he was BSing, but I've always had a personal policy not to force people to work if they don't want to. It's less painful to pick up the slack than to deal with the fallout of apathy. So I started filling out his write-up while he spewed his sob story, then told him to get better and we'd see him next shift. While still on the phone, I heard, "Holy crap, guys, it worked. I can't believe that dumbass bought it." He had called the office phone a recorded line. With much pleasure, I scratched out the disciplinary action, circled recommended termination, and sent the recording to the GM. Story 49. I was working desktop support for my college IT department during my freshman year. I had IT certifications going into college and was hired part-time. I had to call Dell's Enterprise Higher Education Support to handle some routine RMAs for several desktops, something I'd done many times before. The CS rep I reached seemed a bit edgy and not very bright. I had to keep correcting him while explaining why certain hardware had failed. After I gave him all the info he needed, he apparently thought he'd put me on hold. Instead, he screamed profanities about how stupid I was, probably trying to impress his coworkers, though maybe also frustrated that some 18-year-old kid was correcting him. When he was done, he muted the phone. There was a long pause. He must have realized what had happened. He unmuted and tried to proceed politely. I interrupted and said, "Now that you've gotten that out of your system, I need to speak with Steve." Steve was the manager of that Dell department, and I knew him well. That guy ended up being fired the same day once Steve reviewed the call recording. Steve told me he'd been an a-hole anyway. Story 50. I was a third party to this, but a phone order rep at the company was on the phone with a customer who was complaining that their order had not arrived yet and asking why it wasn't expedited. They hadn't paid for expedited shipping and was being a bit over the top about it. Finally, the conversation ended and she hit the button on her headset. This headset had a motorized lever that lifted and lowered the handset, but sometimes the handset wouldn't align properly, so it would lower without actually hanging up. She thought the call had disconnected and muttered, "What an a-hole," then went to take the next call. That's when she realized what had happened. She was super upset, worried. she was going to be fired. It was a big customer, but not business ending. She told her boss, who told the sales director, who then called the sales rep, a fiery little woman in Texas, to explain what happened. The saleswoman called the customer, who said, "She called me an a-hole." She replied, "Yeah, you can be. Maybe tone it down next time." The customer called back later to apologize to the order rep, and they laughed it out. Moral of the story: there are humans on both ends of the phone. Story 51. An ICU doctor called a neurosurgeon but didn't like what he had to say. He slammed the receiver, an old-school corded phone, and muttered, "Geez, how old is this guy? He doesn't know what he's doing. Guy needs to retire." Immediately followed by an indignant harumph from the slightly askew receiver, not quite hung up on the base. About 5 minutes later, the neurosurgeon, a covering doctor no one had met before, walked into the ICU team room and said, "So, who's the one who thinks I need to retire?" All the resident doctor's eyes turned to the ICU doctor. The previously hard-ass ICU doctor now meekly gave a half-hand raise and said, "Oh, I was the one who called." The neurosurgeon then spent 10 minutes schooling him on the indications and contraindications for craniotomy, like a med student, while all of the ICU doctor's residents watched in beautiful schadenfreude. Story 52. Oh boy, story time. I'm a public adjuster. For those who don't know, that means I represent you instead of the insurance company when you file a claim. I fight on your behalf to make sure you are not underpaid or undercovered. A lot of what I do involves fighting carriers when they wrongfully deny claims by misapplying policy language. As you can imagine, these calls can get contentious. I record every single phone call I make. Every single one. I once dealt with an adjuster who was particularly frustrating. It was a toilet drain water loss that should have been easily covered. During our inspection, this adjuster took a very facetious position on some policy language to try to wrongfully deny what was easily a $100,000 loss. His tone was patronizing, and it was clear he knew his position was false, but he was smug and loved being able to say no. Fast forward to a post-inspection call. After I had emailed him a complete policy analysis explaining how his position was wrong, the correct coverage position, and submitting our demand for payment, what's known as a sworn proof of loss. After 25 minutes of debate, he smugly says he doesn't want to discuss it further, that he'll review my documents and will get back to me in a week or so, then says he's hanging up. Except he doesn't. And then I realized he was already talking to his manager in the background, not realizing the call was still active, a call I was actively recording. They then spent the next 15 minutes loudly discussing and laughing about how they would ignore anything we sent in. Illegal. Make us wait until the last possible day to respond. Also illegal. Deny the loss because it would cost too much. Again, illegal. And even going over in detail how they would phrase the denial to make it seem at least somewhat plausible, even though they admitted they would normally cover it. Their assumption was that the insured would never sue, so it wouldn't matter. Right about then, the adjuster realized he hadn't heard any new calls and turned back to his phone, noticing the call was still active. I heard him mutter, "Oh shit," and then the call ended. The next morning, I contacted another manager I knew at the carrier, sent him a small clip from the recording, and suggested he have in-house counsel call us. I got a call the following morning from their counsel advising that payment for the full amount of our position was in the mail, along with the information for a new adjuster assigned to handle any future payments. Still, the most blatant bad faith I've ever recorded on a call. Story 53. Once I had a customer on a support call who kept interrupting me and rambling every time I tried to explain the solution to their problem. I put my phone on mute and muttered, "Jesus Christ, I could help if you'd stop jabber-jawing at me." Well, my phone didn't mute. My audio driver decided at that exact moment that the mute button didn't work, and the customer said, "Excuse me, what did you just say to me?" Quickly, I covered myself. "Sorry, my brother is standing here and keeps trying to suggest solutions, but he doesn't know a single thing about VMware." Smooth. The customer replied, "Oh, haha, brothers, right? I don't think he totally bought it. It's been over 2 years now, and nothing ever came of it, so I figure we're fine. I still think about it every time I hit the mute button on my phone." Story 54. Very late to the party here, but I received a very strange butt dial about 5 days after the January 6th insurrection. I had no idea who the caller was. The number didn't show up on caller ID, and the call had an area code I didn't recognize. It was about a 5-minute message in which I could hear several people talking at once, both men and women. They were arguing about blowing up a bookstore in Portland, Oregon. They also talked about hanging a book author they all disagreed with and mentioned the Proud Boys and other seditious things. The voices were sometimes muffled and hard to make out, but the conversation alarmed me enough that I contacted my local FBI office. I received a call back shortly afterward from an FBI agent who asked me several questions about the call and the caller. He then asked if I could send him a copy of the recording, which I did. He called back the next day. It turned out the call had originated somewhere in Northern California. I forget exactly where. And he asked more pointed questions, including whether I knew anyone in California. I didn't. He then explained that the voices I heard appeared to have come from a podcast. Somehow, the caller or listener had dialed my phone number, and I received a full 5 minutes of the podcast they were listening to. The following day, a black SUV pulled into my driveway, and 2 FBI agents came to my door. One of them was the agent I had already spoken with. He asked to see my phone, specifically the message itself. I had nothing to hide, so I let him look through it for a few minutes. They were very polite. We talked for a bit, and then they left. Of course, I was told the conversation I heard was part of a podcast, but I still can't help but wonder. If it was such an innocuous podcast, why would 2 FBI agents show up unannounced at my house just to look at my phone? I don't know why, but I still have that agent's number saved in my contacts. How many people can say they have the direct line of an FBI agent stored on their phone? Story 55. I actually got broken up with for the first time because of this. I had gone up north to work at a summer camp, and at 15, the idea of going long distance with my girlfriend was challenging, but I was willing to try. On the morning of my 16th birthday, I got a very drunk and sloppy phone call from her wishing me a happy birthday. There were about 10 other people on the line, all of whom I didn't know. I guess she thought she had ended the call, but afterwards, she proceeded to tell them about her plans to break up with me and how she thought I was a loser. She ended up breaking it off later that day, and I ended up having a really awesome summer meeting new girls and making friends up north. Story 56. Years ago, I was trying to get cable installed at my new home. The cable company was a small local business that was terrible. I was told I would have to wait 3 weeks. I asked if there was a cancellation list, and the woman said there was, and that she would put me on it. I got home from work to a message saying there was an opening in 2 days. I called immediately, and she said she had already booked someone else. I told her not to worry about getting in touch with me next time. Just book me in, leave a message with the time, and I would make sure I was home. The next day, same deal, message, but no booking. Same conversation, and she said she understood. The same thing happened the following day. I got a lot, frustrated and slammed the receiver down, yelling, "Friggin' bish!" Then I heard a click. I had been dialing on speakerphone and picked up when it rang through. Unlike every other time, I had forgotten to disengage it, so the line stayed open when I slammed the receiver down. I never got another call about a cancellation appointment. Story 57. Actually, it was a butt dial to voicemail situation. Long story short, my boyfriend at the time butt dialed me right after we had hung up, but my phone went straight to voicemail because I had terrible cell service at home back then. I had already walked back inside. I always had to talk outside because the service was so spotty. I checked the message later and heard my boyfriend, his best friend, and his girlfriend all chatting while driving around about how to keep it a secret that he had cheated on me. I heard enough details that I was able to confront him and prove I knew. It wasn't just speculation. He's definitely an ex now. I was 16 at the time, so it hurt. But looking back, I can laugh about it. Story 58. I've been working in a call center environment for a large bank for almost a decade, and I've heard some fantastically awful stuff when clients think we've disconnected. Our policy states that clients should be the ones disconnecting. One time, I played back a call for an employee where he thought he had hit mute, and the client heard him mutter, "What the shit?" under his breath after a question. That was fun. Probably the most memorable incident was when a client didn't believe we actually record or monitor calls. He got way out of line with my employee, and I was observing the whole interaction. At one point, he said, "Listen, you're going to give me what I want, or maybe not, but your manager will give me 1 or 2 of those fees, then I'll go to their manager. I will keep going until I get what I want, and at some point, I'll just lie and say it was COVID." I read back to him, word for word, everything he had said, and his heinous treatment of my employee. He was reminded that he wasn't the big fish he thought he was, that this kind of behavior is unacceptable, and that his business isn't needed. It's wanted, but but not like that. He was thoroughly embarrassed. Story 59. Okay, so this one changed my life, and it's going to be long. I could write pages describing the context, but we'll start here. I was 16 and had been living alone after my mom disappeared one day. No notice, no plan, no car, no cell phone, and about $60 to my name. Just a broke high schooler, suddenly living alone. After about 4 months, one of her friends came to the house with a plane ticket for me to visit my mom. This visit to her new boyfriend's house in Vermont turned into a shock. She informed me that I would have to move in with her there for my senior year of high school. For many reasons, this was an absolutely terrible situation for me. My dad picked me up in Vermont after a few weeks. He had summer custody and was driving me back to my house in Georgia to pack everything for the move. My mom had left suddenly, so almost all of her belongings were still in the house, along with mine. We had barely made it down the driveway of her boyfriend's house when she called my dad and asked to talk to me. During the call, she reminded me that she was my mother. I was a child, and I had to do whatever she wanted. Classic manipulative parent behavior. As soon as we hung up, I started telling my dad about my plan to get emancipated. I had done a lot of research and was basically ready to launch into this plan as soon as I got home. I just needed his cooperation, since I would be emancipating from him as well in order to continue living on my own in Georgia, and some money for a lawyer. After a while, I thought I heard muffled screaming coming from his phone in the center armrest of the car. It turned out I had not hung up, and my mom had heard everything. I listened as she screamed about how I was an ungrateful bitch and that I could never live without her. After a minute or so, I calmly said, "I'm sorry you found out this way. I was looking forward to you receiving the court summons. Get a lawyer," and hung up. It's now going on 9 years later. I successfully got emancipated and haven't spoken to her since I won in court. I graduated from my dream college on a full scholarship, got married, and moved to a different country, none of which she had any part of. If any kids living in an abusive household are reading this, it does get better. It is 100% okay to cut your parents out of your life if you need to. Your life goes on after high school, with or without them. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.